Hey everybody, this is Emanuel Solomon, the People Man, with the People Man Talks podcast. This is episode 4, You Don't Know You Culturally. Man, I hope everybody is doing well. If you don't know who I am, my name is Emanuel Solomon, the People Man, and this is the People Man Talks podcast. And I'm an interpersonal skills coach. I actually help high-performing professionals of color to promote and reposition with power through increasing their cultural emotional intelligence. Yeah. So if you are a professional of color or an advocate of color, this is a show for you. We are developing ourselves culturally. We're developing ourselves emotionally. We're developing ourselves mentally. Man. We are taking our life, our careers, our businesses to the next level through becoming more of who we truly are, man. This is time. This is exciting too, because I've been doing a few episodes here on the You Don't Know You series, and today we're talking episode 4. You don't know you culturally. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen with you just so you can check it out. And those who just give me a quick second here. All right, I think we're getting somewhere. We are getting somewhere. Okay, so You Don't Know You Culturally, episode 4. Let's get it. Hope you guys are excited. Hope you guys are ready to learn something, ready to kind of dive in and learn something. Something might be review to some of you guys, but I think it's amazing when we can develop ourselves in all these different areas of culturally, mentally, and emotionally, and develop the interpersonal skills to be able to combat some of these areas of our life as well. So let's talk. Let's get into it. You don't know you culturally, and so really you don't know you culturally, and if you are a high performing professional of color, then this doesn't bother you to be challenged. It's okay that you need to grow, because I know I need to grow and continue to grow. So this is something that is a no-brainer, but for some that have a fixed mindset, this could sting a little bit. But if you know that this is a challenge for you to actually grow and develop, then you're excited about this and what I'm about to share with you. I just want to go into a quick definition of culture. Now, culture is the way of life of a particular people as shown in their ordinary behavior or habits, their attitudes, their moral or religious beliefs. And another definition of it is social behaviors and norms found in human society. So culture is very broad. There's all kinds of cultures within cultures, but we're really focusing on ethnic culture. Talking about different folks, their ethnic culture, who they are through that lens. And so you don't know you culturally, right? And that extends to black, white, and Caucasian or white. And some of you guys know, if you've heard me before talk about what white really is, it's not an ethnicity, it's a social position, right? And it's a social position. So when I'm talking about white, I'm not talking about all non-melanated people. And I'm not talking about the definitions that are used in our typical, way of talk. I'm breaking down the deeper meanings, and so I'm kind of giving some new perspective on something that's been talked about a lot. So white is not a race, right? It's not a an ethnicity. It's a social construct, and it's a social position. And so we'll break that down a little bit later. But just so you know, like if you are a non-melanated person, a Caucasian person, you don't have to be white. Um, Being white is a choice, both consciously and unconsciously. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so now some of you guys I know are super woke, and this might be a review for you. You know your culture, ethnicity. You know it to a T, right? You know your foods. You know your traditional garments and language and all these different things that you know yourself on a deep level. And you can trace yourself and your lineage before white supremacy. So you know to some level who you were post colonization, not post, but pre um, colonization and pre white supremacy. You're in a very, very small minority of the super woke. Maybe you're that type of person that just knows, you can trace your lineage all the way back, and not only that, but you really know and experience your real cultural identity on a deep level. But for most of us, if not all of us, we still need to grow in that knowledge of culture and ethnicity to discover who we really are. Like I've already talked about one of the most. I've already talked about the Lion King and how using those messages from the Lion King. Uh, Remember who you are, Simba. And the fact that when he didn't know who he was, and he was doing all kinds of things from running out, and to a land that he didn't know, becoming a pseudo lion, a lion that didn't even eat meat. He was over here eating on leaves and stuff, living with meerkats and warthogs. Didn't know who he was. He had an identity crisis. And the only way that he was able to come back and reclaim his kingdom was he had to figure out, remember who he was. And so a big part of knowing who you are is knowing who you are culturally, ethnically. And so, um, I'm going to make a few assumptions here, and I hope you can rock with me here, making a few assumptions. The first one is that you have a baseline understanding of white supremacy's effects on the modern world. Okay, like you understand that this is not a natural or normal thing that's happening. The fact that white supremacy is controlling the world, and it's changing things for all of us. Also, I'm assuming that you know that this white control, domination, and destruction of melanated people has lasting effects, and these effects can actually be passed down genetically. A great book you can check out is Joy DeGruy's book, uh, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. So that's another assumption. Also, do you understand on some level that the destruction of the destruction of the black and brown self-image has impacts on our ability to produce massive results. So knowing that our self-image has been changed, we've been tinkered with and tampered with psychologically generation after generation, and that affects our self-image, how we see ourselves, how we view ourselves, and ultimately our identity. And if you know anything about change, identity is the place where change lasts a lifetime. So if you understand that, you understand how crucial it is for black and brown people to come to a new understanding of who we are and our identity. If we want to be the elite level producers, performers, um, uh, and be able to get to the next level in our career path, in our businesses, okay, and produce massive results. Another assumption is that you're actually open to new perspectives. that you're open to learning, that you're open to growing and developing yourself. So that's another assumption. And then finally, the assumption is that you value and love people and culture, right? And ethnicity, right? So these are some assumptions coming into this, that you're open, you value people, you love people, you love culture, okay? Um, and I said before, maybe you're too woke to get anything from this, but maybe I'm not talking to you, and that's okay. But some of us, especially Black people, here in the United States and across the you know the diaspora that are not in Africa, that did not live in Africa, that were taken to North America, South America, all these different places in the islands. We really, on a deep level, need to know ourselves on a deeper level, because we've been stripped. We've been our identity, our culture has been stripped from us through whiteness and white supremacy, and we're struggling to pick up the pieces, struggling to find culture and ethnicity and identity, to have a strong and true self-image that's not steeped in whiteness. So, the sad part about this is basically that, when a man or woman doesn't have a strong cultural or ethnic identity, they don't just lose their identity, they adopt a new one, and something else replaces it. So we struggle, and we struggle to find who we are, and we find it in other things. We find it in other ideals, and we find it in other ideologies. Sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's um, uh, certain values, or whatever. But one of the main identities that we take on as people of color, in a white and white supremacy society, is um, that we adopt a white self-image, and we actually see ourselves, and we actually see everything else around us through a white lens. And that goes for Black, brown, and Caucasian people. And so I feel like I should kind of talk about whiteness and white supremacy a little bit deeper. I don't know if this is a good time. I think I'll move on to the next part. But just being so so drenched in these different I would say in these different uniforms that we put on of whiteness. It just changes how we're able to move, and it changes how we're able to be ourselves, and it hinders us. Scary part is that the business of white supremacy thrives on control and domination. And so if you don't have an identity, they'll give you one. you know they have plenty of uniforms for you to try on, and they've got a size and a color for everyone in this room, or everyone who's listening to this uh, podcast, everybody who's looking at this. There's a uniform, there's a suit of whiteness just for you, and it will come in a form that you don't expect. And if you're not preparing yourself, if you're not uh, increasing your level of awareness, then you're probably already wearing that uniform. So, let's talk about our past. I think it's important that we get an understanding of our past. It helps us to learn from our mistakes, and gives us a more promising future if we really understand the lessons. That way we don't have to repeat those same lessons. So let's go into a few things today. We're going to do some cultural and ethnic basics. Hopefully it can give us some clarity as people of color, professionals of color, on actually what's going on. And so I'm going to go over four things today, really quickly. I'm gonna go through a Tribe Called Quest, the Fab Five, and what is whiteness. Put on your uniform. So strap in, guys. I hope you guys are doing well and ready to learn some good stuff. And so let's go to a Tribe Called Quest. Okay, so I like a Tribe Called Quest. You got Q-Tip up in the front, doing this thing, Fight Dog, all these other, Ali, um, you know, a Tribe Called Quest. They're a '90s group, hip hop group, has some dope soundtracks and dope music. They really changed the game. But I'm not talking about a Tribe Called Quest. I just wanted you guys to remember this so that you can understand some type of metaphor, which is the fact that life before white supremacy, like it was tribal. There was no such thing as race. Race is a new construct, you know. Um, Really, just in the past 500 plus years, we've had to try on this thing called race, and it's been forced on us. But before that, there was tribes. Everything was tribal, right? I mean, you had your groups, you had your ethnic groups, your cultural groups, and people, warred and people did their thing, both positively and negatively, as far as living life. But people dealt in tribes. They weren't like, oh, this is a Africans weren't like, oh, this is a black dude, this is a white dude, and there wasn't a unsaid hierarchy that ran the world based off of a figment called race. And so, even though we're so ingrained in race, because it's just what we have to do, for the time being, race has not always been around. Okay, and I think just understanding that is going to open us up to what's really going on, and understanding these different ideals that kind of set us up for being stagnant, or being paralyzed, being stuck. So if you can kind of break free from some of these things mentally in your mind, then you can understand what's going on a deeper level. So, you know, um, the world, I mean, modern man, if you believe some of what um, the experts say, and we've been around, 40,000 to 50,000 years, modern man, and so we've only been experiencing race for the past 500 plus years. What race is and how we feel about race and how we line up in race. So it's really important to understand that. And we were tribes. We were tribes, different tribal groups, and tribal groups that had different customs and cultures, and different unity and different divisions. But it was not based off of a hierarchy of skin color and non-melanation. We've always had prejudices. We've always had biases, and that will not change. But race didn't have that because we were tribes. So it's just good to remember that. Let's go on to the next thing. I want to talk about the Fab Five. The Fab Five, yeah. England, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. That's the Fab Five. I mean, this is where race all started. Okay. Um, you know, I just go over it really quickly. Just I'm not going to be going deep here, but you have to pay attention to these five groups because they started race, and they're the ones that really started white supremacy. Now, if you're one that kind of looks a little bit further a little bit further back in the past, you can definitely look at Italy, Roman Empire, as setting the blueprint of what was to come. They didn't really have white supremacy yet. or whiteness, but they did have a supremacy, and they did have a system that was set up in order to control people. And so the Fab Five took notes. They took really good notes on how to control and how to use certain tactics and psychological warfare in order to enslave people on a whole new level. So, like, if we're talking about it, you know, we got to think about the world. You know, look at the world like as it is. Okay, when I'm talking about these five, you know, Spain, Portugal, France, England, and the Dutch. I'm gonna say the Dutch rather than the Netherlands because you know that kind of includes, you know, some parts of Germany as well. And so what I want you to understand is that these five groups took over the whole world. They took over the whole world, not part of it, like the whole world. If you look at anywhere in the world now, you can kind of see the blueprint and the effects of white supremacy. You can see the effects of colonization. You can see it. I mean, if I'm lying, then what are the five languages that are spoken all over the world, no matter where you're at? You got black people that are speaking French. You got uh, Australian people or indigenous Aboriginal people speaking English. You've got Brazilian people speaking Portuguese. Um, you know, all these different places, you're going to see the blueprint. You just look at the culture, look at the language, look at the different the customs. Now, some groups are able to keep some of their customs and some of their culture and some of their ethnic identity, but much of that is stolen. Much of that uh, is um, is stripped by design in order to control you more easily. And so this is the Fab Five. They went out to all the world and said, hey, you know, this is this is our time. You know, they found in the late 1400s was really where it started. You know, 1490s, 1480s, and a lot of people don't know, but Portugal actually kind of started the push. You know, they started the slave trade, and they were doing slavery first, and they did it before anybody else really on that level, on the type of slavery that they administered. And so, um, you know, Spain was really close behind, and you know, England, France, and the Dutch, they took a little bit longer to get into the game, but they came along too. And you know, as they went out into all the world, they found out they were like, wow, like, as we do our same tactics as far as, you know, killing, raping, robbing, looting, and you know, trying to subject people um, to our form of life. They realized some really crucial pieces. They found out, one, that, you know, they were a minority. They found out that you know, that two, they were melanated, and most people around the world, they found out, actually had color. And so even when they tried to rape, you know, which was a typical, you know, tactic that many groups before Europeans, you know, tried to do, because that way you would kind of change the line and the lineage, and the next generation would be a little bit more docile, because you know, the father of the conqueror was the person who persecuted you. The problem is, though, that when you don't have melanin, or you have a lack of melanin, the children don't look like you, and that identity and that loyalty is not did not seem to be the same as in Europe. You know, it wasn't easy. It wasn't as easy to try those same tactics. And so they found out that, hey, you know, there's a lot of them, a lot of these dark, you know, brown and black folks all around the world, and they're more than us. So we got to figure out something, and we got to see how we can control them. So they had to figure out a system, in order to control us. It's a system that's still operating today, which is white supremacy. But they had to figure it out. So they used some of the blueprints from, the Italians, the Romans, of uniting under something, uniting under an ideal, psychological ideal. Like before, everyone was Rome, like the power, the prestige of the world, Rome. But what the Fab Five did was they figured an ideal. They had to figure out something they could come together with. They were France, they were Spain, they were Portugal, apart, but together they were white. And that was the ideal that they united under, is that ideal of whiteness, this positional power. It's a social standing. It's a positional power. And what whiteness is, it is the control, domination, and destruction of non-white people. It's that position. And white supremacy is the system by which it is administered. So when we're talking about what white is, it's not a color. It's a position. It's a social position. And that social position um, created a hierarchy, right, for who is able to have what and when. So basically, when you're white, right, you have the authority, right? Remember manifest destiny. You have the authority, the power under God to control, dominate, and destroy all all melanated people. That's your right when you're white. Sad, man. It's crazy. But you have to understand this stuff. You have to understand that this is where it came from. They united under the ideals of whiteness. And before they weren't, these different, these 5 countries weren't like best friends, but they, when they found out that the world wasn't flat, and they wanted to take advantage of that, and they were able to take advantage of that through the system of whiteness. They had to create a structure of that. And that's when they created race, social construct, and that social construct, that made up idea that they used to imprint into the minds of Black and brown people, and even their own people, is still holding up today. So race, this is a really important thing, is that race can only be held up by whiteness, because white people created race. So they created this social construct of race. They were really able to break down and categorize people through race, so they could like segment you. They could segment you and then limit you in your own mind and in the mind of others. That's you have to understand that one tactic that was used and is still used continually by white people is psychological control, reinforcing that with violence. It's just a combination of psychological control and then reinforcement by violence. And if you understand that, you can see whiteness and white supremacy's blueprint over all the world, and not only that, but in every area of activity. If you ever check out Neely Fuller's work, he talks about the areas of people activity that white supremacy holds over, right? Or the areas that white supremacy attacks in, which is all areas of people activity. I'll name those off: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. All areas, man. So um, this system of whiteness developed. It evolved, just like the people evolved. It's not a machine. When people think about system of white supremacy, they're not really understanding the concept on a deep level. These are people that have either consciously or subconsciously identified as white. And so the behavior then produces these maladaptive behaviors of control, of domination, of destruction. So if you kind of understand these things, um, that white supremacy doesn't show up in the same form all the time. It adapts and it changes with the people that have perpetuated it. So now some 500 years later, each racial group, whether black or brown or Caucasian, are now soaked in whiteness. and these effects are over the whole world, man. So one thing I wanted to point out, one thing that I really wanted to go over is, we understand the Fab Five. I mean, we understand that that they went out into the whole world and united under this ideal of white, and created this system in order to do that, which is white supremacy. And we also understand that race is that way to separate these different groups. So the system has been polished and um, has been very well tailored and iterated. Like when you're doing trials and test runs, and you iterate and you change and you adapt and try new things. Like it's been holding up for a long time, and it's been synchronized, and it's been changed so that it can adapt to the new climate, new societies, new forms, in order to stay around. Let's talk about whiteness a little bit more, because I don't think a lot of people understand really what whiteness is. They think that whiteness is like a cultural group. I mean, an ethnic group. Like it's just you being non-melanated makes you white. And I tell people all the time that you can be any of the Fab Five. You can come from any of those places and not be white. I know it sounds crazy, right? You're like, what are you talking about, man? Like, no, you can be Italian, you can be German, you can be Spanish, and not be white. Whiteness and being white has some criteria to it. As a matter of fact, if you look at the evolution of whiteness, there were some of those groups, especially now, have actually had to grow or be grafted into whiteness. So it's not just about the color of your skin. You can look at the Irish, who were hated and despised in the United States, the Italians, some other groups, some of the Dutch groups were hated and despised too, that were in this country by the English or the Anglo-Saxon whites, right? Because they were the ones that kind of started it, but they realized that they needed numbers, so they grafted different groups in, and they kind of won their white. They won their white approval. They got their white card. Now they're able to access that card whenever they need to. And so all Caucasian people, they're able to, at any time, at any given time, they can access whiteness. And the only, and that's their choice because they're at a social position where they can do that. That doesn't mean they all do. Um, Not everybody accesses it. They still have the opportunity to because of the system that's set up of whiteness over all the world. And so, um, if you understand that you can take that a Caucasian person, and I make a differentiation between Caucasian and white because a Caucasian person and how I'm describing it is a non-melanated person. But in order to be white, you need two criteria, and I'm gonna give you that really quick. In order to be white, you need to have two criteria. One, you need to be non-melanated. That um, is a is a like a, what do you call that? That's an entry factor. Like that you can't get around that. In order to be white um, in this society, you have to be non-melanated. That's one. The second criteria is that you have to uphold and you have to reinforce the systems of white supremacy. So you have to do those two things. Those are the two criteria. One, you have to be non-melanated, and two, you have to perpetuate and uphold systems of white supremacy. And that can be consciously or subconsciously. Doesn't matter. So understanding what whiteness is can keep so many of us from being confused. Keep so many professionals from being confused about what white really is, and that a person a person that's non-melanated has a choice whether they want to be white or not. They might be treated as white, but they have a choice to run from whiteness and embrace ethnicity and leave that that identity of whiteness in the dust. And even though people of color can't be white, we have an opportunity as well to leave that identity of whiteness. So steeped in it. Man, whiteness is deep. Whiteness is really deep. And just really understanding what it is and how it works is takes time, but it's necessary. It's necessary for us to become the people that we need to be. Yeah, and then finally, let's talk about put on your uniform, because this is really what I remember this, like, you know, when you were younger, you hated putting on uniforms, you know, your shirt and tie, or you know, if you went to a private school, you know, you hated putting on your uniform. This is a perfect illustration here because you got this white dude right here. So I don't know about you guys, but are you people of color, professionals of color, do you like this uniform? I mean, does it fit you well? This white uniform? Because there's a uniform for you, and it's picked out just for you. It's got your size, and you know, and if you just put on the uniform, you can advance and you can promote and you can, you know, change your life. You can assimilate. But a part of you is gonna die here. Part of you is going to be stripped, and a part of you is going to be destroyed in the process of putting on that white uniform. And you might actually be experiencing some of that conflict, you know, at work and in life, and trying to try on these uniforms that don't fit you, because that's not you. It's not your culture. That's not your ethnicity. That you don't eat that. You don't eat that food. You don't drink that drink. You don't speak like that. You don't treat your family like that. That's not a part of your culture, your ethnicity. But you've adopted a new uniform. You don't even know that you're wearing it. So, We have to be aware of that. As people of color, we've been soaked. We've been soaked in whiteness. Um, and we have to understand that. We have to know that, you know, that we've been soaked, that we've been drenched in whiteness, that separating ourselves, both black, white, and brown from whiteness is a chore. It's like separating ourselves from whiteness is like separating uh, juice from water after it's mixed. It's a continual straining process. And that psychological soaking of whiteness has destroyed our self-image, our ability to produce at the highest levels. We're seeing so much through a white lens, through white concepts, white education, white everything. Our perspective, even, you know, people of color, and we're unaware of this. This is all below the surface. Most of it is below the surface. Stripped of our true cultural and ethnic identity has debilitated our ability to find community and solace and comfort in people that look like us. And that's the thing, man. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, especially for Black folks in the United States, and um, you know, even you know, South America and the Caribbean have lots of issues with being soaked in whiteness and our identity. Latinos have it too, you know, and in different other ethnic groups. I mean, white supremacy has affected us all, but um, some of these groups are so steeped in whiteness that they don't even know that they're excited about being conquered by whiteness. They're excited, and they praise whiteness, uh, the authority, that power, that control, and then they end up adopting it and doing the same things, like their father, like their enslaver, like their, you know. And so we have to, if we want to become who we need to be, if we want to grow our self-image, if we want to develop our true identity, claim who we really are, then we're going to have to do a few things. We're going to have to change some things. And the only way that we're going to do that is if we detangle from whiteness, and that if we take that uniform off and put on a new one. It's through conscious and subconscious detangling and stripping of whiteness from our identity through daily action. You don't know you culturally.